The mid-season patch for the finals is now finally here. There are a lot of changes to go over, and in this video, I'll kind of be explaining what they mean for you, whether you are a casual player or whether you're more of a competitive player. So starting off, they say that there's going to be a stun gun rework in the future. Now, it is not in this update, but they say that they are going to give more information on it in a future update. I imagine the goal for this rework is to try and keep its effectiveness, but make it not nearly as painful for it to fight against. I know a lot of the more casual audience really does struggle with the stun gun, and I'll be honest, it's not really fun to fight either. I don't really personally have a problem with dealing with it, but it just isn't very fun to face. Honestly, if they kept the ability for it to stop people from stealing cash outs and disabled specializations still, and they removed the movement penalty that it gets, I would be completely okay with that. The only reason I ever really use it is to stop cash out steals. But we'll just have to see what they end up doing. Now for things that are actually going to happen in this update, they did make some gadget changes. Starting off with the breach charge. They made the delay between throwing the breach charges from 0.9 seconds to 0.6 seconds. This doesn't really change anything at all. It's a nice quality of life improvement, I guess, but this doesn't really make it any more or less powerful in my opinion. After that is the Lockbolt launcher, and they made some big changes to this one. They made it so that you can attach it to objectives once again, and they also increased the activation grace period from 0.8 seconds to 0.1 seconds, making it slightly easier to lock onto targets. They also decreased the minimum and max pull distance from 8 and 10 meters down to 6 meters for both of them, which basically will mean that people who are caught in the lockbolt have a lot less room to maneuver around. They also increased the strength of the pull to 50%. They also made the lockbolt deal a little bit of damage, up from 0 to 5, which to a lot of you might seem like really not much, but this is actually possibly a very big change. Basically what this means now is that if you get someone on low health and they're running away from you, if you then hit them with a lockbolt, this will stop their health regeneration again. This also means that some combos, such as the Winch Chaos 23 melee combo, which would normally leave a light at just a little bit of health, but now with the lockbolt, it should be able to instantly kill them. Now they made some big changes to cash out. They decreased the amount of cash that you get by depositing it from 30% down to 20%. And they made the total amount that you get for completing the cash out come up from 70% to 80%. This is a direct nerf to the plug meta. For those of you who don't know, basically meant that teams would just prioritize focusing on depositing the box. And the idea is that if you deposited enough boxes, you were guaranteed a spot in the next round, and you didn't really have to worry about defending cash out stations. This was usually done with a light and a gateway, sometimes with the grapple as well. But with this change, it should make it so that depositing the cash box is still useful, but it's not as much of a win condition as it used to be for some teams before. They also increased the amount of cash lost from a team's total from a team wipe from 10% to 15% in ranked. After this, they ended up nerfing Charge and Slam. They made the initial impact go down from 130 damage to 100 damage, and they also made the damage done by subsequent hits deal 40 damage now instead of 50 damage. They also decreased the minimum damage from the ground slam based on fall height from 80 to 50. Now I guarantee a lot of people are going to like this change to Charge and Slam, especially you light players out there who used to get instantly killed by it a lot of times. Now this should happen a lot less, and even some of you mediums should definitely feel a bit of a change now. However, I do think that this just kind of cements Charge and Slam's place as being a strictly casual pick, as it really wasn't used much in high-end play at all, and I think that these changes are just going to make it so that people never even touch it. Honestly, I might even switch my Charge and Slam heavy to now use Goo Gun instead. Now, I know a lot of you really don't care about the competitive scene or the ranked scene much at all, but I just figured that I should let you know. Anyways, I imagine that most of the player base is going to like this change. After this, the Dematerializer did get a nerf, so that dematerialized objects now only stay dematerialized for 15 seconds instead of 30 seconds. But they also made it so that props attached to walls now get dematerialized as well, which should make it a little bit more consistent. To summarize, you're basically going to have to be watching your demat charges a little bit more closely than you used to. After this, the Guardian turret did get a little bit of a buff. If you manually pick it up, it should now only take 3 seconds to recharge, down from 8 seconds. So you always kind of wanted to manually pick it up when you could. You always kind of wanted to manually pick up the turret anyways, but this just even gives you more of an incentive to do so. They also decreased the range of the Winch Claw from 12 meters to 10 meters. Honestly, I don't think this is a huge change. Now, don't get me wrong, this is definitely a nerf, but I don't think it's going to stop people from using the Winch Claw. I think we will still see plenty of people use Winch Claw in competitive play. It's just not going to be quite as easy, but it should still be easy enough to use. After this, the Cerberus did get some buffs. They increased the damage from 9 to 10 per pellet, and they also decreased the size of the pellet distribution, which should make the weapon more accurate. They also buffed the reload times. This should make the Cerberus feel a lot better to use. Whether it becomes a competitively viable weapon, we'll see, but it should definitely feel a lot more consistent now. Now, after this, they say that the Seal 40 did get some quality of life changes. They decreased the radius of the weapon's projectile from 10 centimeters to 5 centimeters, which should mean that it accidentally hits objects a little bit less. They also decreased the self-damage multiplier from 1.6 to 1.25, which means that you should be dying to your own Seal 40 a lot less. In the past, one of the biggest counters you could do to a Seal 40 user was simply walk right up to them while shooting them, and they would either die to your damage or their own self-damage. Now this should happen a little bit less. They added a little bit of an adjustment to the dagger's FOV when it is fully charged. This isn't a huge change, but I'm definitely going to appreciate this one, as I sometimes would whiff my dagger because it wasn't fully charged. So hopefully this helps me out a little bit. Now the FAMAS did get a nerf. They decreased the fire rate from 230 rounds per minute down to 220. And they also decreased the damage per bullet from 24 to 23. Now this isn't a huge change, it still feels pretty good against medium and heavy players, but it definitely feels a lot worse to use against light players, which is kind of further cementing its place in the meta. The FAMAS is really good against mediums and heavies, but right now if you want to kill lights, you use the FCAR. After this is the LH1. They decreased the damage from 48 to 46, and they decreased the rate of fire from 280 RPM to 270 RPM. Honestly, I really didn't notice much of a change when I used the LH1 today myself, and I think a lot of people aren't really going to notice a change either. I think the only people who are going to really notice this are people at the very top levels of the game, and even I am not really seeing much of a difference at all. After that is the Model 1887. They decreased the damage from 13 to 11 per pellet, and they also increased the minimum damage falloff multiplier from 0.6 to 0.7, which basically means it should have the same range. Now this is a pretty big nerf to the model. With all these changes, I kind of feel like every medium in ranked is going to end up just using the FCAR, and not many people are going to be using the model at this point. I think it'll still be strong if you have really good movement and if you use cover correctly, but it's definitely not going to be quite as good as it used to be. However, the Pike did get a damage buff from 47 to 50 damage. Now this is actually noticeable. Lights once again get killed by the Pike a lot easier. So basically, even though the LH1 nerf didn't really feel like much, now that the medium's Pike is back on the menu, this is the counter to that weapon. After this, they also buffed the SR-84. They decreased the bolt action animation duration from 1.25 seconds to 1.05 seconds, which will basically increase the fire rate. They also increased the damage from 115 to 118. The SR-84 damage isn't super noticeable except against heavy, where it can now kill with one headshot and one body shot. With this change, I'm not really sure how to explain it other than that the SR-84 is feeling less like a sniper rifle and more like a marksman rifle. After this sword did get a little bit of a change. They increased the length of the sword's secondary attack hit sweep by 55 centimeters, which basically is just reverting the changes that they made back in patch 4.6. For those of you who didn't know, the sword left click used to have more range than the right click did, which was the lunge attack, which was really annoying for some people. So now they should have similar hurtbox ranges. A few gameplay bug fixes were made. The two to notice here is that you can no longer bypass manual action animations by interrupting them. So for instance, you can't use a melee to interrupt these actions anymore, but it does seem like you can still use specializations like the winch to do an animation cancel. And also, cast shots should not launch quite as far away during a jump pad interaction. Other than this, they made some general performance updates along with changing Kyoto Destruction again, I guess, and also added some cover to the museum on Sys Horizon. They also made some anti-cheat updates and apparently don't let you use NVIDIA Profile Inspector anymore. I'm not really familiar with this program, but apparently it's not allowed anymore. And finally, they increased the amount of emotes that you can hold up to 8. And that is everything important in the mid-season patch for Season 5 of the Finals. I just recently got to 13,000 subscribers, and if you want to help me reach 14,000, subscribing would be really appreciated. A big thanks to all my members for your support, and I will see you all in the next one.